We bounce off each other in all kinds of very interesting ways. You create your life, and you can recreate it. I think of the things that have happened in my life. Until I was 4, everyone in my family was convinced I was going to be a soccer player in the local soccer team. Because I was good, apparently, as a kid at that age. And then, do you remember there were these big polio epidemics that swept across Europe and America in the 50s? And I got it. I was the only one in the family to get it, despite my best attempts to cross-infect the entire community. But because I wasn't very happy about it. No, I mean, I was the only one to get it in the family. And so I was paralyzed overnight, you know, from being this kind of fit, able-bodied kid. I was in hospital for nearly a year. And then I came out and I was in a wheelchair. So that was really put an end to my soccer aspirations, or at least my parents' aspirations for me. I mean, it wouldn't stop me getting in the local team now, by the way, given how they're performing. I think they'd be rather pleased if I made myself available to them. But the idea, you know, when I was a kid in Liverpool with this large family in the 50s, that I would be living in Los Angeles talking to you is an outrageously improbable idea. And I say it not as some kind of compliment to myself, but to say your life is completely improbable too. I mean, how many of you really anticipated the life that you are leading now and that you've led so far when you were kids? I mean, you may be working in a field that you wanted to get into, but this job, these people, this place, the life you've actually had, the partners you've had, the kids if you've got them, you can't. That's the point. You create your life as you move through it. And you create it according to the opportunities you see around you and the talents you find within you, and whether you're open to both. And you can recreate it. So life is unique. Every life here is unique. It's creative. And thirdly, it's organic. What I mean by that is life is not linear. It's organic. You compose it as you go. It's a constant process of improvisation, isn't it? You see, you kid yourself sometimes. There are times in your life when you have to write your resume out. And you put it all down on, you know, a side of paper. You put key dates in. You put certain headings in bold, some in italic. And you make the whole thing look like it was a plan, don't you? Because the last thing you want to do is to give the impression to a prospective employer of the actual chaos you've been living through. You know, you want to convey to them that this was a strategic plan that you've been executing faithfully since you were 15. Of course, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. You actually make the whole thing up. So life is organic, and it's not linear. They're the 3 key principles. Now, I say finding relevant is a two-way journey. It's an inward journey, it's an outer journey. The inward journey is to get to know yourself better. What you're trying to find out more about in your life, if you're finding your element, are firstly what your aptitudes are, the things that you're good at. One of the problems you confront is that we live in cultures with a very narrow conception of aptitude. And it's an idea that's been promulgated systematically through many of our education systems. We have a very narrow view of ability in schools. We tend to confuse all forms of intellectual ability with IQ or academic ability. And actually, human talent is tremendously diverse and multifarious. My brother Derek, for example, was always dismantling engines, putting them back together again. He had a natural aptitude for mechanics. When he was 10, people brought their motorbikes from across the neighborhood for him to fix them. He was fixing these things for the teachers at his school, who were failing him at the end of each term for not being very interested in academic work. You know what I'm talking about. Some things people are good at are disparaged, discouraged, or marginalized. And the consequence of that is that people often conclude they're not very good at anything because they haven't found something that they might be good at. So one of the principles of finding your element is to have a much bigger conception of aptitude. But the second part of finding your element is knowing more about your passions. Let me just say a quick word about this. By passion, I mean things that you love to do. You see, in English, we only have a couple of words for love, and they're not terribly helpful. We use the same word for, you know, for your feelings towards donuts and your fiancé, so it's not very helpful. We need something more nuanced, I feel, around this. The Greeks have a word for it, which is philos, which is that sense of loving activities. It's the word that gets tacked on or at the end of words like being a bibliophile or a francophile, a love for certain ways of doing things, certain things. That's what I mean. You see, finding your passion is an intriguing process. The word passion itself has changed its meaning. What it originally meant was suffering and endurance. It's in that sense that people in Christianity talk about the passion of Christ, the suffering of. Of course, now it means the exact opposite. It means things you love to do, things that fulfill you, things that give you a sense of deep reward and of meaning and purpose. And that transition from a sense of suffering and endurance to a sense of fulfillment is really this journey that I'm describing. Finding your own is in that sense, not in a religious sense. I don't mean it that way here. Finding your own in that sense is a spiritual process. What I mean by that is that there are some activities, aren't there, that feed your spirit, that lift you up, that energize you. There's a distinction to be thought of here between physical energy and spiritual energy. You know what I'm talking about? If you're doing something you love, at the end of the week, you might feel physically exhausted, but on a high spiritually, in terms of your energy. If you're doing things you don't care for, you might be physically fine, but depressed. If you do something you love to do, an hour feels like 5 minutes, doesn't it? If you do things you don't care for, 5 minutes feels like an hour. If you do something that resonates with your spirit, your whole sense of time shifts. It's like you're surfing on an energy that's lifting you up. So the inner journey is also about finding that, the things that resonate with your spirit. And very often it's things we take for granted that we haven't thought about for a long time. We think back to our childhood and think, I used to love doing that. Why did I stop doing that? Sometimes maybe you were steered away from it, and maybe you weren't. So the inner journey is about those two things, about finding your aptitude and passion. But then there's the outer journey. I just want to say a couple of words about this before we wrap up. You see, to find your element, you have to want to. When I say that we live in these two worlds, it's true. We create our own view of the world. It's what Anais Nin meant when she said, I don't see the world as it is, I see it as I am. You know that. There have been lots of attempts throughout the whole of human culture, cultural history, to come up with classifications of human beings. Like the signs of the zodiac, the humours that were very prevalent in medieval times. Sociologists have got into this in a big way, as psychologists have. Jung came up with his ideas of introverts and extroverts. People have talked about the different temperaments. I remember once reading a sociologist who said there were, I think, 14 types of people in the world. I think a 15th was recently found just outside Cleveland. See, it's helpful to think about it that way. But we shouldn't confuse the theory with the reality. We're in different roles, in different situations, with different people. People bring out different things in us. They suppress different things in us. Different aspects of ourselves are revealed in different sorts of situations. So we've tried to talk a little bit about these forms of classification, but I urge you never to take them seriously. If there are a set number of people in the world, types of people, my nearest estimate would be probably 100 billion of them. That we are all unique instances, and we can learn from these classifications, but we shouldn't be imprisoned by them. When I talked about happiness earlier, that many people are not happy, one of the key reasons for it, and it's an obvious thing for us to agree on, I think, is that there is a terrible tendency to confuse happiness with material well-being, being the driving theme, really, of modern culture, hasn't it? Of materialism. That if you get this stuff, you'll be happy. All the evidence, of course, is the contrary. That some of the most affluent countries in the world are also home to some of the least happy people in the world. There is no correlation between wealth and happiness. We should know that. You only have to look at people who win the lottery and to see how desperately their lives often get mangled as a consequence. I mean, I grew up in a large working-class family in Liverpool. I'm not romanticizing poverty, by the way. I'm not saying let's all get poor, it'll be great. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. You know, there are some things we like, but they don't in and of themselves deliver happiness to you. Happiness is not a material state, it's a spiritual state. If you look at the history of psychology and psychiatry, it's interesting that the vast majority of what's been written and researched in these fields since the last century, since the 19th century, has been about the negative effects of feelings. It's been about negative feelings. It's been about fear, anxiety, and depression. Very little has been written or researched about what contributes to positive emotions like joy, happiness, and compassion. In the last few years, that's begun to reverse. There's a big movement now, it's called positive psychology, which is trying to look more properly at what makes us fulfilled and the conditions under which these things come about. And there's a very interesting writer called Sonia Lyubomirsky, who is in the mainstream of some thinking in positive psychology, to say that there are various factors that contribute to a sense of well-being, spiritual well-being. Part of it's biology. You know, some people are naturally a bit more miserable than other people. Some people are a bit more buoyant than other people. You know that. So biology accounts for some of it. Circumstances account for some of it. But neither accounts for all of it. Because there's a third factor which is very potent, which is behavior. What you actually do. What you choose to do with what's at your disposal, internally and externally. And the people who are most fulfilled are the ones who take action to be that way. And one of the ways in which you can be that way is to discover these talents and passions to find your element. It's one of the great sources of well-being, of spiritual fulfillment.